I'm reading from my book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. And this is a book that I put together after my own social science research interviewing over 100 extremely happily married couples. And that set me out to discover, was extreme happiness accidental, or was it a formula? Well, I've already read the first part of the book that says what I thought I'd hear in the interviews. Today, I'm going to begin part 2 of the book, which says what I actually did hear super couples say was part of the super couple formula, which there is, in fact, a formula. And by the end of the book, I'll read out that formula to you. But if you're learning a lot from this, if it's helping you to have a better marriage, if you appreciate my work, I'd be absolutely humbled and honored if you'd if you'd be able to contribute something, either through prayer, having a mass said for me or my ministry. And for those of you that are able to donate financially, below there's a link, buymeacoffee.com, and it really, really does help. This is my ministry. This is the only way I bring in money, is doing this. So whatever the Lord puts on your heart, I'd be honored. And I do, by the way, pray for everyone that donates and has ever donated for me when I go to mass. God bless you. All right, so let me begin. Today, part 2, what I heard super couples say in the interview. The title of this chapter is, I would never want to hurt my spouse. Love is kind. I'm always embarrassed at the things that now seem like common sense to me, or that I refer to as my no duh moments, because at one point those same moments were so foreign to me that they should have stood out to me like a dairy cow in a 10-acre field of dandelions, but did not. The phrase, I would never want to hurt my spouse, was one of them. I mean, how could that be? I'm a PhD in marriage, and hearing those words from one spouse of another actually surprised me. I mean, shouldn't that have been obvious? Shouldn't that be the mantra of every married couple? Well, it certainly should be, but sadly it is not. I likely hurt my husband all the time. My callous words and frequent name-calling displayed anything but the desire not to hurt him, but rather to tear him down, to hurt him right back when he said or did something first to hurt, irritate, or frustrate me. But I must begin with the obvious. Because I am neither unintelligent nor ignorant, my first analysis begins with trying to understand what could have so easily blinded me and quite possibly blinds you to the truth. I mean, how did we miss this? When you first started dating your spouse, would you have wanted to hurt him or her? Never. If so, you know they would not have wanted a second date. We dated precisely because the opposite took place. You not only did not want to hurt your lover, you did your best to ensure you did nothing that would produce any negative emotions whatsoever. While dating, most of us did the opposite and did everything in our power to produce feelings of happiness, peace, and contentment within our lovers. If your date expressed embarrassment that he hadn't had enough time to shave for the date, you'd likely have minimized that embarrassment by saying, oh, it's okay, I like that scruffy look. Or if they expressed dissatisfaction with their inability to have moved up in the ranks at their job, we'd have likely shared a sentiment that lets them know we understand their dissatisfaction, but would never have tried to hurt them with that information with a comment such as, geez, what's wrong with you? Are you lacking in ambition? Of course not. I mean, just writing that seems laughable. Yet embarrassingly, many couples do in fact hurt their spouses with words or actions. Why is this even a topic for discussion? Because it happens so frequently. The reasons will be dealt with in our chapter on trust. For now, know that with super couples, the idea of hurting one's spouse is incomprehensible. At some point in my interviews, my super spouses would express deliberateness in making sure that they never do or say anything hurtful to their spouse. There is a kindness and a thoughtfulness in the ways in which they spoke to one another. This is not to say that during interviews, super spouses always agreed with one another. In fact, I can't remember a single interview where we didn't touch on points of disagreement. This happened all the time, as it does in any marriage. But when these areas of disagreement became manifest in our conversations, my super spouses seemed to tread even more softly than in their areas of agreement. I mean, they chose words that were so soft, kind, and non-judgmental. More so, super spouses would find ways to allow the other to express their differences and then seek an opportunity to validate their spouse's perception. In one such instance, Gina and Dwayne had just discussed her perception that he was a pessimist while she was an optimist. While Dwayne didn't initially hold the same perception, he felt he was a realist, of course, his beautiful bride found a way to phrase it back in a way that actually complimented Dwayne for this personality trait. Well, you do have a way of grounding me and helping me to see those things that I might not have considered. Of course, Dwayne was still not fully satisfied with this new knowledge of Gina's perception, but true to super couple form of not wanting to discuss anything potentially perceived as negative about his spouse publicly, in this case, me and my digital recorder, Dwayne told Gina, I'm intrigued by this perception, and I can see we're going to have a fun time finishing this conversation later. Like all my super couples, neither spouse would ever say anything that might have potential for hurting the other. I remember one interview when I posed the question I posed to every super couple, and that question was this. Did you ever get hurt, angry, or upset at or with your spouse? Both, like all interviewees, answered that of course they did. Who doesn't? We're only human, you know. However, when focusing on the potential for inflicting hurt on one another, the wife was instantly taken aback. Brooke actually gasped and teared up at the thought of hurting her husband, conveying to me that doing so would be equally as painful to her. I remember this moment touching me deeply and humbling me, as I had often said hurtful words to my husband, both intentionally and unintentionally. I felt deeply ashamed. Why was this idea so foreign to me? I vowed that moment to never consciously attempt to never again hurt this man whom I had promised to love, honor, and cherish. What about you? Have you ever hurt your spouse? Was it unintentional? Or worse, have you done so deliberately? Regardless of what you have done or said in your marriage, know that if you're striving towards super, you must with great diligence seek never again to hurt your spouse either. Trust me, I sympathize with you because most of us hurt others when we first feel hurt by them. For those of us who have admitted to ourselves that we have in fact hurt our spouses, it's worthwhile to consider the transition from that time when we began dating and hurting them was unconscionable to the time when it became commonplace and unrecognizable. For me, I can still recall the first time my future husband hurt me. It stood out to me because prior to that hurtful encounter, he had only made me feel loved and happy, like his princess. I was only 18 and he was 20, and he was teaching me to drive a stick shift. I know, you're already getting it. When my young future husband met me, he was driving a 1979 cherry blossom red Pontiac Trans Am, and he loved it. It was only 4 years old. I guess I should have known he was head over heels for me when he actually allowed me to be within a 50-foot radius of his beloved piece of mechanical heaven. But he did. And to think he was also willing to allow me behind its wheel to teach me to drive it should have been recognized as a relative marriage proposal in itself. Actually, he was teaching all of my girlfriends how to drive stick that day. What a stud. When I eventually got my turn behind the wheel, I was a natural. I had observed 3 other girlfriends being instructed so that by my turn, I knew exactly what I was to do. I got her in first gear and then second almost effortlessly. Danny complimented me right then and there. Wow, you're good at this. I blushed. Unfortunately, I tend to overthink things, and by my 3rd or 4th try, I began to overthink and lost the natural ability of my first attempts. During one such gear change, I ground the gears loudly, producing that all too familiar sound of metal grinding metal, at which point my sweet boyfriend loudly yelled at me, "Hey, watch it! What's wrong with you?" I was deeply hurt. He had never before spoken to me like that, and at that moment I was treated as less important than his precious car. I got out right there in the middle of the road trying to hold back my tears. I failed, and I refused to go any further. I told him to park his own car. I don't know if he knew how hurt I was. Likely he did, as my reactions left little doubt. But here it is, 30 plus years later, and though he probably forgot about that interchange an hour later, I still remember it vividly. Oh, I know it's no big deal at this point, and we obviously got over it, but it was in fact a hurt. My boyfriend hurt me, albeit unintentionally. The problem is that we often store those hurts in our hearts and our minds, and further, when opportunity presents itself, we are less diligent about holding back our own hurtful words, thereby beginning a negative pattern of hurting one another. The true significance of this problem is my having remembered this incident at all. In every super couple interview, when asked if they'd ever experienced any marital difficulties with one another, every super spouse immediately said yes. They seemed to laugh at every single spouse. They seemed to laugh at the question. However, when asked to share those difficulties, every single spouse struggled to come up with an example. I mean, eventually they'd recall some long ago example that clearly had no residual negative effects on the couple. Why was this so? It was so because of one of the strategies that fosters superness is the ability to let go of hurts quickly so as not to be able to easily recall them in future disagreements. The fact that I still remember the incident 3 decades later showed that I, like numerous other couples, had stored it for later recall. This happens for various reasons. Many spouses do this to have ammunition for their next argument. Not always, though. Some simply have extremely good emotional memories. That's good or bad. Regardless, we must recognize that our imperfect spouses will sometimes hurt us. Much of the time, it's unintentional. To hurt our spouses unintentionally, as I am certain my boyfriend did, is harmful to the relationship, but can be, if infrequent, manageable. But to hurt our spouses intentionally is an altogether much more detrimental and insensitive act of carelessness. I'm not sure of the first time that I hurt him, but I am certain that it became much more frequent over the years. We hurt because we were once hurt too. Yet at some point, it becomes less important to know who was the first than to recognize the pattern of hurting. To be a super couple, this pattern must stop. You cannot be super in your love for your spouse if you are careless about your ability to inflict hurt on that person. More so, if you are not yet married, I implore you to recognize that it's much easier to prevent this from ever becoming a pattern at the onset than to fix it after it's become a habit. Take it from one who knows. After decades of hurtful word choices, it took much focused effort to undo the damage that we had inflicted upon one another. However, the good news is that change is absolutely possible. My husband and I are now much more thoughtful about our word choices with one another than ever before. And why shouldn't we be? After all, as I strive to become a super wife, why would I ever want to hurt my spouse? What outcome would it produce but a negative one? Thus, Measure your every utterance with utmost care and choose only the most tender words to express your thoughts and feelings. As you do, you will soon be on your way to super. But kindness and I would never want to hurt my spouse are only the first steps. The next step, adoration. And I'm going to stop right there because the next chapter is going to talk about what so many super wives said. I adore my spouse. But for now, I hope this is helping you get started on your own journey towards having a super marriage, an extremely happy marriage. Yeah, it's going to require you to check yourself. And when you, like me, recognize these things in yourself, you're going to want them to stop, but you're in a system with your spouse. You just trying to stop isn't going to cause him or her to stop. You're going to have to be diligent about continually being kind to your spouse long enough for them to recognize that, wow, maybe this is a new pattern. Maybe I should be kind back. Easier said than done, but if it worked for me, it can work for you. And if you need my help, look me up. You can find me at Christine@breakfastwithbacon.com, and I'd love to work with you either by yourself or as a couple. It's what I do. And if you do want to support the work that I'm doing, please click on the link below and buymeacoffee.com. I surely could use it. It's the only income I have to support this ministry, this vocation, really. And it will go far to help me save the 1,000,000 marriages that I hope to save before I die. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching this Bacon Bit. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.